corruption, fraud, bribery, mis-selling. Hardly a day goes by without a corporate scandal being reported in the news or on the front pages of our papers, undermining our trust in the corporate world and the international economy. If this is not enough, we see alternative facts, false reporting, impressions created that lead to judgments by the public without that any trial or any serious chance for those involved has been given to somehow make their point. I must say, I trust not so much in social media, but in you, because you came here and you are right to attend this afternoon session. And in the name of Die Zeit, this first-rank media house, and on behalf of CMS, for whom I am standing here, I would like to welcome you all and thank you for having made the decision to join us. It is Rainer Esser, where is he, the outstanding CEO of Die Zeit. I think the fourth time that we are here. We are kind of jointly holding this afternoon session here in Davos for the fourth time. Some of you, or many of you, are repeaters, which indicates that we did it rightly and that we offered a good program in the past, and I'm sure this also counts for today's program. It is, Rainer, a great pleasure for us to have this arrangement partnering with you. Thank you for making it happen together with us. Coming back to what I said at the beginning, it is of course so that in many scandals you see people involved who somehow act with criminal intent or at least with bad faith. But a number of issues that we see may also be caused by what we as lawyers call negligence, lack of intention, maybe time pressure when decisions are made. In other words, not so much criminal energy, but simple negligence. Whatever the reason is for what is happening, the attention of the public, of the press, of the clients, and of the governments and the legislators is guaranteed. And in the corporate world, we have to deal with these issues much more today than in the past. So some countries have introduced particular laws to reduce or avoid any type of corruption cases and things that are connected there with, such as the UK with the Bribery Act, or France with the Sapin II laws. Also Poland and Czechia have introduced anti-corruption laws, and in other countries are maybe a bit behind or rely on their penal law systems which should be sufficient to cover this sort of issue. But certainly the attention within the corporate world is there. And as one of our CMS studies revealed, the number of the large European companies that maintain sizable and real serious compliance departments has increased from 25% to 1/3 within 2 years, so between 2015 and 2017. And this is a trend that will definitely go on. Apart from this sort of issue we have to deal with, we are confronted with, as I mentioned already, alternative facts, fake news. An award has been issued for the fake news by the US president. Whatever that means and whatever that brings us to, it definitely shows that we have a serious issue. We sometimes have no idea where certain news come from, who the interest groups are who produce them, but anyway, we tend to believe what is written in the papers, rightly or wrongly, but by the time people tend at the same time to lose somehow trust in what they learn from social media or from the serious press, and this of course creates issues with which we all have to deal, not the press only, but also politics, economy, and the normal consumer. We have this afternoon an outstanding panel and outstanding guest speakers and panelists who will deal with these issues, and I look very much forward to the next 1.5 hours. I'm sure it will be very interesting, and afterwards you are all invited to stay for a while and have one of these glasses of wine or water, for which we pay something like 23 Swiss francs per water glass or so. So, thank you very much. I may hand over the... I may invite Jochen Wegner and his panel here and hand over. Thank you very much. Thanks. Enjoy the afternoon.
Perfect, yeah.
Knock that off. Okay.
So hello, great that you made it from Mrs. Merkel's speech over here just in time. Our panel is called Information in the World of Misinformation, Real and Fake News in the Digital Age. I never wanted to mention this term again because there's a lot of confusion going on what fake news really is. So it's misinformation that looks like journalism, it's propaganda, it's biased information, it's questionable information we do not trust, it's bad journalism, or even proper journalism if you look at what Donald Trump says is fake news. It's valuable information we want to ignore sometimes, and sometimes it's just simple truth. So I hope you are confused enough, and while you think about this, I'll introduce our panel in alphabetical order. So we have Martin Barron, also known as Marty. He's the executive editor of the Washington Post and maybe the most famous investigative journalist, one of the most famous on this planet. And he's one of the one of the two editors I know still in office who inspired a Hollywood movie. Obviously, being Spotlight, I'm sure you don't know the other movie. It's called The Devil Wears Prada, about I'm sorry for that. You're originally registered as a guest here, so we are pleased to have you on the panel. Thank you very much. And this is Susan Minton Beddoes, also known as Zanny, editor-in-chief of The Economist since 2015. And as you always have to mention, the first female editor in the 174-year history of The Economist, right? And I have to disclose she's one of the 5 consulting editors of Die Zeit. So, and this is Lisa Maria Neudert. She's German, but she works in Oxford and a researcher at the Computational Propaganda Project,
Yes.
correct, at Oxford University, and does a lot of groundbreaking work about fake news and bots and stuff like that. We'll take later about that. And then Tench, welcome. He's a lawyer, expert for media law, and he has quite an interesting life. So you went with Rupert Murdoch to the UK Parliament to be asked about the phone tapping scandal. Maybe we don't talk about this today.
I saved him from the custard pie.
Very interesting, very interesting. Very interesting life. So first of all, how bad is it really? So I'm totally confused. There's a big a wave of research going on these days about fake news and bots and stuff like that. And you do a lot of international research about this. So just could you elaborate on that? How bad is the situation on a global scale when it comes to misinformation and propaganda and stuff?
Yeah, first, plain and simple, it depends on who you ask. If you are asking Macedonian teenagers, they might actually tell you that misinformation and fake news are in a very good shape right now. There's a group of teenagers in Macedonia that have been building fake news sites on the US elections and have been able to actually make thousands of dollars from fake news stories on President Trump. If you would ask President Trump, which brings me to my next point, I'm sure he would say, this panel here, fake news. Pretty sure. However, when you're talking to the social networks, to Facebook, to Twitter, they are probably right now at a point where they would admit that there is something going on their networks. There are some problems, but at the end of the day, their platforms are not about breaking the world, but about connecting the world and about bringing them together. I first of all want to connect to what you just said, which is stop talking about fake news. I think fake news is a term that is highly problematic. I think we're mixing very many phenomena within that term. It is mixing sensationalist clickbait content as well as whatever media Trump right now thinks he doesn't like. So I think it's better to talk about junk news, what we're talking about at the project. And for that, we are saying this is the kind of content that is false, that is purposefully misleading, that is propaganda. And for that kind of content, the situation is actually pretty bad. Facebook has been looking into the US elections and has found Russian propaganda on their pages and has said that 126 million Americans have seen Russian propaganda content on Facebook, which is an enormous number. Our own research has found that the amount of junk news as compared to the amount of professional news, so the Economist and the Washington Post of the world, in the US is 50-50. So for every piece of professional, high-quality information, there was one piece of misinformation being shared. In the UK and in Germany, the ratio is a little bit better. We had about 20% of junk news content there. In France, the elections saw the least amount of junk news. We had a relationship of about 7-1 there. But in general, yes, it's a pretty bad situation. So the question is, how did we get there? I think on the one hand, we got there, yes, because we have foreign people that are trying to meddle in our elections. Yes, we do have the Russians. We also have a social media ecosystem that makes it incredibly easy to produce professional-looking content. But I also think it's not just an ideological viewpoint, but it's also very much the economic viewpoint, because we have a media ecosystem that rewards and that makes it able to monetize not just high quality content, but also the low quality misinformation content.
So did I get it right? The US is the worst country when it comes, so democracy, I'm sorry, when it comes to fake news, right?
When we're looking into Western democracies, I would say yes, the US is the worst, judging from our research.
Who's next?
I think right now at the major democracies, we do have interesting things going on in Catalonia, definitely. Germany, the AfD is also trying to speed up their processes, but it's really a phenomenon that is not on the fringe anymore, but is something that has established itself within the political mainstream. It is something that the Brexit campaign has been playing with. It is something that Trump does on a daily basis. And it's increasingly a populist form of communication that is also reaching the political mainstream.
Marty, it's strange because we see thesis and antithesis at the same time. So in this world of confusion, maybe the trust in media, especially in the US, is declining. On the other hand, your business model is growing like crazy these days. I know that you don't want to share numbers, so please share numbers about the. So how many subscriptions exactly did you gain after Trump?
Well, we don't give those numbers exactly. But we did announce last fall, at the beginning of the fall, that we had earlier that summer, we had reached 1 million digital-only subscriptions on top of the print subscriptions that came with digital access. So, and we have continued to grow very nicely since that point. I won't give you the current number because I'm not permitted to do so, but it continues to grow, and we're very happy with that. And I think that highlights the seeming paradox that you mentioned, which is that overall trust in media has declined. But what you find is that actually, in certain segments of society, about half of the United States, actually confidence in U.S. media has begun to increase. Now it tends to lean left, tends to be Democrats more than Republicans. Republicans are very skeptical of mainstream news outlets other than Fox News. It's the only one that they really trust. But among Democrats, the trust that they have in the Washington Post, the New York Times, the major networks has actually gone up. The result is that over the course of the last year, we've actually begun to see somewhat an increase in overall trust overall in U.S. media. Slight, but not inconsequential. And so, I think that's because we're doing our jobs, and I think people want us to do our jobs. A certain segment of the population wants us to do our jobs, and the more that we do it, the better we do it, the more confidence that people have in us. And also, they are more willing to support us financially. I think there is great nervousness in the United States about how the information and news ecosystem is being polluted. And they have come to recognize, a lot of Americans have come to recognize that if they don't financially support quality news, they won't have quality news. And at this particular moment in history, they want to support us. And the challenge for us is to make sure that they continue to support us over many years and many decades, well after Trump is president.
It's very strange because you have one of the most effective investors, which is Jeff Bezos. Who is Jeff Bezos?
Yeah, he's doing well.
He thinks quality journalism is a great thing you should invest in, right? And it's highly profitable now. And
well, we had a very good year last year, actually. In 2016, we had our first profitable year in 10 years. And last year, we had a very good year, and I won't give you those numbers either. But Jeff does believe that quality journalism is necessary. He thinks that's what people are willing to support. He very much believes that we should ask people to pay for it, and that's probably the long-term, the most sustainable model, certainly for a news organization like ours. And he is very committed to the mission of the Washington Post and what I believe is the mission of journalism itself.
Yeah, it's the same at Economist, right? So another strange outlier doing really well these days. Can you just
try not to think of us as a strange outlier, but okay. We are an outlier, and yes, we are doing well, and that's wonderful, and I'm delighted. But let me answer by putting perhaps what I want to say in the context of your excellent taxonomy, because I think it's interesting. You defined fake news very well, but as I was listening to your definition, I was thinking that actually it's not sort of Donald Trump's definition and your definition. There is a kind of continuum, because I was listening to you and thinking, well, where does the UK tabloid press fit into this? Is it in your definition of fake news or not? Because I would say that there is definitely a continuum where some traditional mainstream media, the UK tabloid press is very powerful, very important, and very much, I think, towards your fake news. The US is interesting, and I'll talk about The Economist in the US context. It's by far our largest market. And we have traditionally, those of you who know us know that we are basically sort of socially progressive, socially liberal, but economically free market. So we've never really fitted very well into the ideological prism of the US. We were never kind of all Democrat readers or never all Republican readers. In fact, both sides read us, and if anything, we probably leaned disproportionately towards Republicans. And so for us, this time has been very interesting because, as you say, there's a kind of situation in the US where sometimes you're either sort of on one side or the other, and we have traditionally occupied a different ground of being the trusted, authoritative source. And there's one poll, I can't remember which one it was last year, which said that we were the most trusted name in news, higher, I might say, than some others on this panel. But I think that's actually because probably our name recognition is perhaps not as high. But I take a lot of comfort from that because I think there's a huge market, as you say, Marty, of people who want authoritative, trustworthy analysis. And that in this time, they want it and they're willing to pay for it. I'm not under any illusions that that is the broad populace of the United States or indeed the UK, but it is many, many millions of people who are potential Washington Post subscribers, who are potential Economist subscribers, who are hungry for trusted, authoritative analysis, the opposite of fake news.
how did you personally get over the point that all the great information of The Economist couldn't prevent Brexit from happening?
Because
It was
I have a
first,
very
you know, it was-
realistic assessment of our clout, and we may be able to convert or persuade a sort of sizable number of people. Our UK circulation is well over 200,000, but we're not the Daily Mail, and we're not a we're not that scale of populist.
Your readers are in the
Yeah.
US, right?
Over half our readers are in the
Yeah.
US.
You
I mean,
couldn't
by
prevent-
far our largest market is the US. We're actually very strong in the UK. We have a high,
Yeah.
and we are growing very fast in the UK. But I'm not under any illusions that if you got all the Economist readers together, and they probably didn't all vote one way, but even if they had all voted one way, that was going to be the defining thing. We are self-consciously at one end of the market. And we are, championing English-style liberalism, and we will continue to do so. And I hope they're the arguments that appeal broadly. But I'm not. I think it's a bit of a high bar to say that we single-handedly should have swayed the referendum.
No. Because Brexit was one of the first large-scale test case for Facebook ads, and the Leave campaign served, I think, over 1 million ads alone on Facebook to make it happen. And in a way, it seemed to have worked, right? So traditional media will never reach it. May I quote The Economist? I would never say that on stage, but I read it in your newspaper.
Oh no, you.
The population of America farts about 3 million times a minute. It's The Economist, right?
I know exactly what you're going to say.
It likes things on Facebook about 4 million times a minute. End of
Sometimes
quote.
the striking comparison is not the obvious one. So.
But as you mentioned before, the main source of fake news seemed to be not bots or whatever, but the British press themselves, right? So what would you say?
Well, I think there's on the one hand, yes, you have those bigger publishers that have actually found out how to build a business around that. But I think also one of the main dynamics of the fake news that we're seeing right now is that user-generated content is so easily available on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. So the shift towards social media has really transferred the capabilities to design a professional-looking political video, to design a professional-looking article to the users themselves. And combine that with distribution costs of close to zero, combine that with social media algorithms that often favor information that is more sensationalist and that seems to be more clickbaity, then I think we have the recipe for the situation we're seeing right now.
Mm. So the rest of this panel, we only think about one question: what can we do about it, right? So there's a very German version for this. We just forbid fake news. It's against the law in Germany, so it's not a problem anymore, right? So you as a lawyer, could you comment on that? Is that a good idea?
Well, I think it's interesting to think about the means which traditional media can use to guarantee the accuracy of what they produce. What are those means? How can they demarcate their product as being more authentic than fake news? And from a lawyer, I have a particular perspective on that, because there are traditional forms of legal redress by which that can be tested, most obviously the laws of libel. But the problem has been, certainly in both the United States first in the 60s and then more recently in the UK, there's been real pushback on the law of libel. Now, newspapers have considered that to be a boon to freedom of expression, but in both jurisdictions there are now very powerful public interest defences, which means that it doesn't matter that the newspaper gets it wrong, and it doesn't matter that it publishes harmful allegations. If they've done so in the context of a reasonable investigation, they have a defence in libel. Equally, both jurisdictions are pretty free of any significant state regulation, and there's obviously been a battle about that in the UK after the Leveson inquiry, and strong resistance to any kind of imposed state regulation. Now, those are two traditional ways of trying to guarantee the authority, the authenticity, the accuracy of what you've got, and neither actually exist in the two major jurisdictions we're talking about. So I think that then ends up now in more beleaguered times for the traditional media with a problem for them, because there is very little they can point to say, well, we must be right because we are subject to these tests which these other invaders are not subject to. There's very little they can point to guarantee the authenticity. And Speaking about the attitudes on national newspapers, and I don't mean the attitudes on magazines like The Economist, journalistic attitudes are really rather odd, and I've acted as a lawyer very much on both sides, both for and against the media. I have never come across a journalist when I've told them we have a complaint and we think that this is inaccurate, that the journalist looks at me, ashen face, and says, well, we must correct it then, mustn't we? I must put it right. Journalists never say that to me. And they simply don't have that attitude. They're always trying to say, well, is there a defence? Is there an excuse? Can we evade that? And that is my experience of attitudes on the Nationals. I think you'd have a different approach.
Very different.
Yeah,
That's certainly not what happened.
Please
Any of our, and I
please.
think I could probably speak for one
No.
party. That is not how our journalists would
Is there a
behave.
culture of correction in your
We run-
newsrooms?
Yes, and we run a lot of corrections. And whenever anybody asks for a correction, we're required to evaluate it and discuss it with an editor. The reporter has to discuss it with an editor and come to a conclusion as to whether a correction is required. And obviously, we often come to a conclusion that a correction is required, and we publish it. Now, clearly, some people are not satisfied with those corrections, and people can argue as to whether the corrections are adequate to the nature of the error or offense or whatever you want to call it. But you know, we have a culture, and it's actually written into our code of ethics, that we are required to take into consideration all requests for correction and to run corrections prominently when we make them. And in fact, we run many corrections at the very top of a story digitally. If it's a serious error, we're required to put it at the top of the story. It's the first thing somebody will see.
I mean, I understand the culture in American papers, the national papers is different, and I'm a big admirer of the American press and the quality of their journalism. Can I just tell one brief anecdote which will make my point, where I was acting for one of our national newspapers, broadsheet, not tabloid. This was a very long time ago, and they wanted to run a piece about a prominent politician who had various business interests. And they'd gone through the public records about the companies that we have at Companies House, and they'd found all sorts of omissions about it. Some forms hadn't been filed and so on. And they wanted me as a media lawyer, and they wanted me to bring in one of our corporate lawyers just to check this, to say that these were genuine omissions. And the corporate lawyer came in, went through them, and he said two things. He said, yes, you're absolutely right that these forms should have been filed and they weren't. You're absolutely right. But I'll tell you a second thing is this is absolutely standard, that every company would be like this. It means nothing. It indicates absolutely nothing. Indeed, you would be far more suspicious if everything was in apple pie order in this. And the newspaper published front page above the fold, X breaks law in company filings. And I thought, how is that informing your readers? There was nothing in it saying, yes, but this means nothing because all companies are like this. It was about, breaking law. This was about good copy rather than accurately informing your readers. And I thought that's a very different relationship between the journalist and the reader, as I'd have with my client, and the information I would give to them.
Can I sort of put this perhaps in a broader context? And I wouldn't be the same as national newspapers. I think I don't know about that ahead, but certainly the Economist is all like that. And we not only on corrections, we also have very detailed. We also have extremely detailed fact checking. Is this on?
I think so.
But I think you need to think of the.
No.
Is it on now? Okay. I think it is important to sort of break the broad media environment into different categories. And one end is the fake news of the sort you've discussed. And then very close to it, or indeed part of it, is the tabloid journalism. And then, however, there's a sort of a subset, which is quality journalism that is increasingly the journalism that is going to be funded by subscription, and those subscriptions are going to depend on being trusted. And so there is increasingly a premium on being trusted. And I think all of these focuses on, we spend a lot of time fact-checking articles, making sure we've got it right, because we know that our whole reputation and thus our business model depends on being trusted, being accurate, being insightful. But I think that's not just us. I think it is going to be broadly part of the way forward for quality news. And so you're going to have a kind of broad spectrum of which one side will be the side that the two of you have talked about. And the problem then for societies is how much do you worry about that? And to get back to your original point, which is what do we do about it, my worry about the kind of German approach, the heavy-handed, we will stop fake news approach, I can do that because I'm half German, is that there is a free speech issue at some point. And at some point you really do worry about, if you're going to have very strict codes, what happens for free speech. And I'm somewhat more relaxed, I think, than some, that I think that we're going to see a sort of an organic societal response. You know, every time you get a new technology, you rewire the body politic, you rewire society in response. So when the printing press was introduced, people thought this would be absolutely disastrous. When, you know, TV was introduced, people thought it would be disastrous for the democratic political process. And yet societies adjust. And I think we shouldn't be too pessimistic about this being a sort of inexorable, disastrous race to the bottom of fake news. We've got a problem. I'm not playing it down. We need to think about what it has to be. But to say we must fix it or it's the end of our democracies, I think may be too pessimistic.
What can we do about it? So Facebook has this problem these days, and they're proposing a lot of things. So one of them is let the users vote which are trustworthy media and which are not. Just quick comments from all of you. How do you think will that turn out?
We don't know. I mean, we've had conversations with Facebook about it, including here at Davos. I think we don't know. I mean, I think that probably large national, well-established brands are going to do okay. Because certainly in the United States, when you look at surveys of trust of media institutions, the well-established brands generally do okay. They may not be, certain institutions may not be at the top. What tends to be at the top are the national television networks, which people recognize. And so many people get their information from television as opposed to from a newspaper or a news site. So, but I think that we'll probably do okay. I think there's a real question about how smaller sites will do, including smaller sites that do good work, because many people, they don't recognize the brand. They may be new media outlets that are doing good work, and maybe not that new, but only, let's say, 10, 20 years old. And so they're not that well known. So when people are asked whether they trust them, that can be a problem. And one of the issues, you know, there are a number of issues with Facebook that are yet to be resolved and yet to be explained. They have basically three criteria. One is it has to be broadly trusted. We don't actually know what it means to be trusted, and we don't know what broadly means. Actually, they're conducting a survey, which is they ask you whether you recognize this media outlet, and then they ask you your degree of trust in that media outlet. We don't know how that survey is conducted. The other condition is that it be informative. To date, they don't know how to define that. They want to be able to define it. They want to be able to establish it without any human being involved in judging whether it's informative or not, but looking for signals. They don't know what those signals might be. They certainly invite our comments. We don't know where they're going to end up, and they don't know where they're going to end up. And then the third, which I actually think is admirable, is that they are putting a premium on news organizations that cover their local communities, their cities, their regions, and those kinds of news organizations, certainly in the United States, need a lot of help today. So, you know, we would like more transparency on the part of Facebook as to what their methodology is, what their definitions are. We would like more opportunity to deploy our own business model on Facebook, which is heavily subscription-oriented these days, not just traffic. We want large amount of traffic, but we very much want subscriptions. And we want to be able to express ourselves, our brand, the way that we do, let's say, in print or online, that it looks like us, it feels like us. And they seem to be amenable to that, actually quite amenable to that, because I think they're very reluctant to have people think that they're getting their news from Facebook. I think it does worry them when people say, I get my news from Facebook. They don't want you to think any longer. They don't want you to think that you're getting your news from Facebook. They want you to know exactly where you're getting your news from. So there may actually be a convergence of interests in that regard. So I think the jury's out on how this is going to work. There are a huge number of uncertainties. But one thing you have to recognize is that Facebook is a much smaller part of our business than it used to be. Referrals from Facebook have dropped precipitously, and not just because last year we had an election and this year we don't have an election. It's been disproportionate. And that's because Facebook had already changed its algorithm to emphasize friends and family. And that's their prerogative to do that. On the other hand, referrals from Google and referrals from Apple News have gone up dramatically. To a large extent compensating for the declines in Facebook. So things are going to shift. look, they have their business, we have our business. I don't think that we should predicate our entire business on what Facebook's doing. There are some media outlets that have done that. They're entirely dependent upon Facebook as their distributor, and I think that's probably a very risky strategy in the current environment.
One of my fears would be that Fox News is also a trusted brand.
It is.
Yes.
It will be, yeah.
Well, it is broadly trusted among a large segment of the American public. And if you ask Republicans who they trust, they really only mention one brand. They mention Fox News. Now, there's some who read Breitbart, or there's some who read the Daily Caller, or there's some who read InfoWars, which traffics in crazy conspiracy theories. But in terms of broadly trusted among Republicans, Fox News is there. And so I would imagine that they would score pretty high.
Lisa, Marty mentioned another thing Mark is trying to do with the Facebook algorithm, namely showing less media content. So will that end the fake news problem? If there are no news, there are no fake news, right?
That actually right now is a theory. A couple of people are saying because Facebook was sick of being scapegoated for the fake news problem, their solution was simply to get rid of news altogether. I think that's putting it a little bit too easy. I, however, also fully agree we need to see more transparency from Facebook, because I think right now with the situation that we're having, we're not going to see an organic solution to this problem. Let me put it this way. 20 years ago, if you wanted to reach an audience with propaganda, you would have put it on the TV or maybe in a newspaper, and then 10 or 20 million people would have seen that and would have exactly known what propaganda they were targeted with. On Facebook, you can, not just Facebook, it's also Apple, it's also Google, it's also Twitter. Content is highly individualized. So there are things like dark ads, there are things like hyper-targeted content, like micro-targeting, and each and every one of us will get their own news diet and potentially also their own propaganda diet. And I think right now we are scrambling for solutions. Regulation is, media is, civil society is. However, we do not have the data to actually know what is going on and to actually come up with a solution that addresses the situation.
Oh, I'm already getting kill signs. We're in the middle of the discussion. It's impossible. There's another way we could fight fake news, and the Washington Post is very famous for that. It's fact-checking, so fighting about facts. Because of you, I know that Mr. Trump made 2,140 false or misleading claims in his first year, right? And it's really amazing to read that blog. Just one quote. There were only 56 days, or about 15% of the time, on which we recorded no claims. These were often days when the president golfed. I love your work. But does it help?
Some days when he golfed, he said he wasn't golfing, by the way. So.
That's fake news.
As far as I know, the problem may be that even if people fight about facts, it's really hard to convince them to have the same basis at the end, right? That's one of the major problems we see these days. So the alternative facts, which is the non-word of the year in Germany, by the way, alternative facts are the major problem at the end. It's about feelings, not about facts.
Right.
So not last question. One of the last questions. So what can we do to address that problem? So emotions, the emotions.
You ask me?
Yeah, all of you. You're free.
Well, look, I mean, I think we have to be, first of all, we have to understand for mainstream news outlets, well-established news outlets, we need to recommit to our true mission, which is to try to get at the truth, and to be as diligent as we possibly can, to be honest, honorable, fair, accurate, but also to be unflinching. When we actually find out what the facts are after we've done a thorough job, is that we actually state it clearly and directly, and that we don't, indicate that it's 50-50. So I think we need to. I think we need to do our job. I think we have to recognize that sometimes things take time to work out, and I think we should be a little more patient than we are. If you think back to Watergate, that was it's not like the Washington Post was believed when it was running those stories. It wasn't. It was viewed as a partisan attack on the part of the Washington Post against President Nixon. He was attacking the media quite aggressively. His first vice president, Spiro Agnew, was the designated attack dog. He had that famous phrase, the nattering nabobs of negativism, and then he had worse phrases than that as well. And so people really questioned whether the Washington Post was telling you the truth. But what happened was that over time, first of all, there was an investigation in Congress, an investigation by a special counsel, and it turned out that the work that the Washington Post did was ultimately validated. And then the trust ratings for the Washington Post and for media generally rose dramatically to, I think, the highest point we have seen since then. And so, I'm willing to be patient in that way. I think we just need to do our jobs, do it right, make sure we're right. Our owner was asked, he was in Turin and did an interview actually about media and the Washington Post. It's the only interview he's done strictly on media and the Washington Post. And he was asked for his principles, basic principles for success with regard to media. He said, be riveting, be right, and ask people to pay. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to be riveting. We don't want to be boring. It's one of the first things Jeff told us, don't be boring. So we're trying not to be boring. I don't know how well I'm doing up here, but
it's okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
And we want to make sure that we're right. Make as few errors as possible. We're always going to make errors, but let's keep them to a minimum, and let's correct them when we make them and correct them promptly. And when we do that, we ask people to pay for the work we do. And the fact that so many people are paying for the work we do is an expression and evidence of trust in us, as it is in other media organizations that have been able to get people to pay for their work. And the reason it's growing is because more and more people think we need this kind of work, and they should support it.
Zanny. We will be driven off stage, so you have the last words.
The last one,
Yes,
that's a bad mistake. I would, well, first of all, I would agree, say amen to everything that you say. I completely agree with that, and I think it is up to us to behave in a way that makes us deserving of public trust. And you've laid out very clearly what, and I hate to end on a slightly downbeat note, but I do think it is worth making the point that this idea that people inhabit different universes and see things from a different perspective and have therefore a view that one thing is an alternative fact or is not an alternative fact is a function of a huge polarization of societies, and it's particularly acute in the US. And so many of these trends we were discussing are the result of very real differences within societies, whether it's about immigration, whether it's about globalization, whether it's about cultural issues. And so I think we should be sort of somewhat humble about what even an improvement within the media world can affect. If we are in very divided societies that have very different views of what the right way forward is, then they are going to look at the same policy, the same fact, and come to different conclusions. Now, that doesn't mean that obviously factual errors should be condoned, but it does mean you can, I force myself to do this when I go to the US. I watch MSNBC in the morning and I watch Fox News at night. And I frankly could be in a different country between the two. And that is...
You are in a different country.
but they are not everything they are saying is a factual lie. Factual, I think some of them are, but not everything. They are basically taking a very different perspective on events that are happening in the same country. And I think they are a reflection of America's polarization as much as a cause of it.
Thank you very much, distinguished panelists. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
And
We did well.
Oh, yeah, we're doing well. Yeah. How's everything going? Going well? Yeah.
Splendid. Too short, but thank you.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, dearest friends of CMS and of the Zeit, What a great pleasure and honor now to welcome one of the most powerful CEOs worldwide. He made it from a family worker's son to the helm in the Bavarian forest to the helm of one of the most prestigious companies. And since he's in charge of Siemens, the company does better year after year. He traveled the world to look after 350,000 employees in 195 countries. And he traveled so often with Angela Merkel that there are rumors that she sees him more often than her husband Joachim Sauer. But the travel he likes the most is to his home in Arnbruck, where he meets 3 strong women who tell him straight their opinion. His wife Rosemary and his 2 daughters. A business leader has to show respect to the people, has to show humility, and has to listen to people. It has to listen. This is his mantra. So let's listen now to King Joe and Uwe Häuser.
Your Majesty, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Kaeser, you're a Siemens man. You entered the company at the age of... Mike? Are we okay? You entered the company at the age of 23.
I probably should switch them because, because you talk to me and I talk to you, so we have the right side of the micro, see?
All right, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And you've seen everything in Siemens. You've been to Malaysia, you've spent a long time in Silicon Valley, you've done mobile, you've done microelectronics, and all other kinds of things. You've been the CFO and then the CEO since 2013, I believe, succeeding Peter Löscher. If there's any man on this planet, any woman on this planet who can answer this question, it's you. What is Siemens?
It's the greatest company on this planet. And it's the greatest because we have 382,000 people working in 203 countries in this world, serving customer every day. And every morning they get up, they go to work because they like this company. And that's, I think, what makes it so special. And if you talk a lot, there's things people talk about these days, here in Davos also. They talk about business to society. They say a company's got to have a purpose. Company needs to serve society and not Wall Street and short-termist and long-termist and all that stuff. I mean, look at our company. We have 380,000 people. They get up every morning because they work for Siemens and they work for their customers. We have healthcare. Healthcare defeats cancer. We have energy, power generation. We are the single biggest company on renewable energies by installed base. So we can do not just talk about. We don't end the war against renewable energy because we believe this is worthwhile doing it. So what I'm trying to get at is a company needs to have a purpose. Otherwise, their people don't give their best every day. And it's very hard to find the purpose. And, if you look at those challenges today, which we have, it is the rise of populism, which obviously can be seen, which is not geographically bound. It's everywhere. You have the smart populists, you have the violent populists, you have the nice populists. And then
who's that?
Pick one. And what we just heard from the panel, this topic about fake news. What is fake news? It's pretty simple. If you don't tell the truth, then it's fake news. If you have a different opinion, this is what we ought to have, because this is what media is all about, that they can, speak their free will. But populism is an issue because many people tend to believe, because you say, I like that person because he fights for us, or she does this and that, or she puts us first, or whatever. So it's complicated because this world has become rich and wealthy, for the most part, because we've been having free trade. The other topic, right after it, the global migration, second pressing topic. Global migration. We have 70 million people on the road today as we speak. And probably from those 70 million, 65 million want to have a better life. They leave their home to have a better life. I mean, come on, isn't that a big issue? And then the third one, which somewhat is associated to that matter, is about climate change. I mean, if people tell me today there is no climate change, I don't know. Where have you been? And number 4, and this comes to Siemens too, number 4, literally, the 4th industrial revolution. We've had 3 of those, and every single industrial revolution had made a better planet. All the time. So chances are that, the series continues and we have another better world. But then I wonder, this time, is there anything different? And there is a massive difference. And that's connectivity, mobility. Every of you have a cell phone. So have the migrants. I've never seen a migrant losing his cell or her cell phone. They typically lose their birth certificate or their passport. They never lose their cell phone because it's so important to stay connected. And that connectivity was also what caught Germany flat-footed on the migration problem. Because I think our chancellor, she said, in German, wir schaffen das, which is somewhat kind of, yes, we can, sort of. And but this wir schaffen das was so powerful because what she was trying to do, the intent was about we have learned from our past. We respect other people if they come to us. We have understood that globalization has 2 ways, not just Germany exporting to the whole world, take the money and run, but also that globalization can come to us. So it was powerful. Problem was that it completely underestimated connectivity. Within 5 minutes, everyone in Africa, in the associated countries knew Germany is open for me to a better life. And we were completely unprepared. And at the end of the day, she was blamed for losing an election when she was showing the world that this country has gotten the message from its past. So why I'm telling you all that, 4th industrial revolution, there's going to be millions and millions of people who are going to lose their jobs. There's going to be more millions of people who will have new jobs. So all is good. Problem is, with our connectivity, we need to migrate now those millions who lose to the ones who get the job. Unfortunately, those millions who lose the job don't have the same qualification as the ones we are looking for. And this is a massive issue, and that brings me to Siemens now because...
Good.
Well, it's all about Siemens. It's all about Siemens because that 4th industrial revolution, we are in the forefront of technology, of applying it already, and even being successful in doing it. However, if you go to Germany today, chances are, if you open a German newspaper, like scandal at Siemens, there is a cruel CEO who sheds 3,000 people, but nothing just because to be profitable. That's what your chances are, at least 50%, if not more. If you're a German, you have a 90% chance. Otherwise, or you don't read newspaper, that's the option. So then you look at this whole speech here, and look at this, and what the hell, is that all about? And I'm telling you something. We are losing about 3,000 jobs in the next 2 to 5 years in Germany because we have a transformation on power generation. I've got 16,000 people working for power generation in Germany, and I don't have a single order in Germany, not a single one. And you know what? We're not even losing market share because there is no market. So now we need to transform those 3,000 people to where we are hiring, and we are hiring 15,000 people in the same period of time. We are losing those 3,000. So it's a test case on how to do the transformation for the 4th industrial revolution. And all you get is, oh my God, He wants to be more profitable. So we need to practice.
All right.
Nothing to do with kingdoms. It's about social integration.
Let's practice discourse. And for a moment, and stay with this subject. I mean, you've been accused in Germany for the loss of these 3,000 jobs in Germany alone, in the energy sector, mainly in Eastern Germany, and you've been sort of in a, let's say, a discussion, a conflict with the head of the SPD, who attacked you, and you wrote a letter back. Why did you do this? Maybe it would be the first question. Why did you engage in this publicized debate?
Well, first of all, I did not have a fight with the head of the Social Democrats. I just wanted him to get the facts straight. That's all. Because he's been relying on maybe alternative facts. First, I thought I was going to send him a book about Manchester capitalism, but then I thought I just give him the facts straight. And there is no meaning to fight against anyone, but I also have a responsibility to protect our company and our people, because our companies are people, and they have their friends. They go out, have a drink, or they smoke, or they eat together. They go to football or basketball or what have you, and everyone says, "Oh my God, what the hell is wrong with you? You know, you're asocial and you're terrible." And the facts are unfortunately different. Yeah. He said we are benefiting from the German government. Maybe we do. But the fact of the matter is, you know, in those last 5 years where we've gotten a few €100,000 for winning some orders, which were actually being in a public bid, we've been giving €25 billion to the German state because we pay our taxes the way it should be. And what the facts also are, in the last year alone, 2017, we hired, how many people do you think we hired? I know you know how many we fired, but how many do you think?
I don't.
I tell you.
I thought you didn't really fire people.
I tell you something. We hired 35,000 people last year in Siemens. 35,000 people globally, 5,200 of them in Germany. Those are the facts. So this is important to know, because typically, and that comes to what we had heard earlier, I mean, have you ever heard about those 35,000? Have you ever heard about those 5,200?
Yes.
Or even more?
Yes.
Well, then have you written about it?
If you had agreed to doing the interview with you, we would have put these answers out there.
So why did you write about the 3,000 we lose if you knew that we are also hiring
Are you sure we're
5,000?
talking about the coverage of the Zeit? Because we were pretty fair with Siemens this time.
You're always fair.
But let's look at this from the society side. You made very clear with your introductory remarks that you're a man who thinks sort of on a larger scale, who doesn't just think about the company but also its role in society. You're also well known for advocating sort of a general minimum income for people, going into
Not a general minimum. That's very important.
Okay.
Not a general minimum income. People need to work hard. People need to look at their own destiny. You know, they have a responsibility to stay employable. We cannot just ask the government, help me because I'm complacent. Not advocating that. What I'm saying is, people who work for 20, 30, 40 years, really hard, they have a right that, you know, when they're old, that they can survive in a meaningful way. That's what I said. I said we need a Grundversorgung, a minimum amount of money for people who have been working all their life. And if this country, Germany, cannot afford that, then we've got something wrong in this country. It's very important. Because you just say, give me the money because I don't like it. That's not the way it works.
Mm-hmm. So you're a socially aware CEO and an outspoken one at that. At the same time, you cut a lot of jobs in areas which are troubled anyways in East Germany, which are at the core at the populist debate, which is the reason why you were also a little bit under pressure from the economic minister. Do you see a connection there?
From
Do
what?
you see
For
Cyprus?
Cyprus, no. She was just giving good advice. And
Okay. But see, do you see a connection there? Do you see a connection between this loss of jobs and the
Well, honestly,
growing division in society?
Honestly, I see a connection between populism and facts. That's what I see. I mean, I can't afford to tell people a lot of stories which I cannot make good on. You know, that's not the way it works, because we have more to lose than an election. I cannot go there and say, elect me because I'm the greatest and the latest and the best, and I turn around and say, well, I need to go into a coalition, so I could not really do it. That's not the way it works in companies. So you need to work hard to do what you say. It's complicated enough because we have to regulate it, we have our competitors, customers, everything. The fact of the matter is, I'm a very, very true believer that a company which does not serve society should not exist, period. And that's why I'm also saying things like, we are a company, 382,000 people, working hard every year. We make about 6 billion euro net income after taxes, about 30% taxes, okay? 6 billion. There is hedge funds out there, really, or other institutions, who have the 20 smartest people on that planet combined in one office. They make also 6 billion profit. So now the question is, what is the better profit? What is the better profit? If you have a profit, making 6 billion profit with 380,000, giving him a job, and hopefully also a family life, or if you have the smartest and the greatest ever created, and also make 6 billion for the ones who are rich already, because otherwise they would not have access to that private capital and that private investment. So now you tell me.
I think
so. That's what I mean with social responsibility. We are not going to let Görlitz down. We are not going to let those people down. All I'm saying is, if nothing happens, 3,000 are gone, because life, unfortunately, is about reality. And if I have no orders, if fossil power generation goes down because of the rise of renewables, I do need to act. And in former Siemens times, the way it worked, honestly, we went to the unions and said, oh my God, 3 to 5 years ago we had a problem. Now it falls on our feet, so we need to act. That's one way to do it. The positive is here, you are so much under pressure that everyone says, oh my God, they're really in trouble, so we need to be mindful. Okay. The other, what we do now is we say, in 2 to 5 years, we are losing 3,000 jobs through transformation, structural changes. However, in the same period of time, we are creating about 12 to 15,000 jobs. So wouldn't the natural common sense sort of thing be, hey, why don't we talk to each other, how we can give those 3,000 people, an opportunity through requalification, through whatever is possible to do to have a future for Görlitz. And that's exactly what we are going to do. That's exactly what we are going to do. And all that noise and circus stuff from people who are after, let's say, signatures to become members of some organization, the louder they act, actually, the less I'm listening. Because if you don't, you get the message across. You don't need to speak louder. You need to explain it better. So we are going to help those people and give them a future, but we need to act together to get this done. Because I tell you something, with the Industrial Revolution, with all the internet now reaching the industrial space, there will be so much change, so much transformation in Germany, everywhere in the world. That this little Siemens thing now is not going to be an annex even in the story on how the transformation has been working. Yeah. And that's really important.
Okay. You mentioned hedge funds. And
that's an example.
The other side of the equation we are right now talking about is the pressures from the capital markets. There are people who say that being a conglomerate, a fleet of small ships, as you call it, isn't enough. This should be a real holding structure. There are people who say that if you add the market value of the different parts of Siemens, they're much higher than the market cap of the company at large.
Sure.
How big a pressure is this? How much of pressure is put upon you, and where do you feel it?
You know the truth?
Yes.
And we are among each other here? Okay. You know what? 0. Not a 0 minute. I can sleep at any place, anytime, anywhere. No matter whether the sell side will write me up this time or that time. And I tell you why. Because if you're a company, if you have to run a company, you have got your customers, you've got your competitors, and you've got your people. And sometimes the regulator, but those three are actually the most important ones. So if you do your job right, and if you are as good, at least, as your competitors are, maybe a little bit better, just a little bit, you know,
Well, there you're lucky right now.
Yeah, well, I'm mindful about the best ones, not the worst ones at this time, because they would be so. And I tell you why I'm so relaxed. And then we'll close the circle about societal and responsibility. So is there any family business owner here? Anyone who owns a family business? You do. So you own a family business. Maybe you have gotten that business from your parents. So what do you do if you're an owner of a business, you got it from your parents, and then you have it? So what is your natural intention to do? Any person of a healthy mind, generally speaking, what do? You take that business, you strive for improving that business as much as you can, and give it in a better shape to your children. Isn't that what you naturally do, right? Everyone does that. Everyone. That's ownership. That's responsibility. That's sustainability. That's built-in long-termism. So now think about a public company like us, Siemens. We have about a 85% free float, right? Free float on the stock exchange. Out of the 85%, about 3/4, 75%, are so-called professional investors. So those professional investors, nothing wrong with them, are fund managers. Okay? So while for you, ownership is a purpose, it's a purpose to fulfill. For a fund manager, that ownership becomes a tool to serve a different purpose. And that means making more money for the investors who have given you the money to maximize. So all of a sudden, ownership becomes turned around from a purpose to tool to serve another purpose, what they have. And that's what the capital markets are all about. And someone's got to stand up. And someone's got to say, you know what? We are not going to do this because this is not good for our employees and our customers and was the social integration of society.
Can I jump in there with one question to clarify? So all of the changes you have made since 2013 or even 2010, all these different sell-offs, acquisitions, joint ventures, none of them was due to ideas and pressure from the capital market?
No, it was all intended to make this company stronger and more powerful, closer to the market, and make more money. And the reason why this is, it's not about getting the money and throw it to some short-term traders. The reason why that is, you can only help the weak ones if you are strong yourself. So if I'm struggling as a company, I cannot help Görlitz because I don't know how to get my funds to finance that stuff. You know, if I'm weak, I cannot go out and say, you know what, that's exactly what I'm going to do, and not what you sell side are writing me, you know, every month a different story, or every quarter typically they change their minds. I can't do that. If I'm strong, if I prove that what I say is right, you know, people listen. And that's where the purpose comes back. You've got to be strong and make a lot of money to help the weak ones. And this is sometimes counterintuitive. This is what was a lot of criticism in the media and in Germany. How the hell can you announce restructuring if you just had your greatest record year ever in 170 years history of the company? And the answer was, look, we need to do what we've got to do. We cannot wait till the election is over or the unions have their new members elected or what the heck. I've got to do what I've got to do when the time is there. Because otherwise we run into the issues others do, who actually neglect what reality is.
Can I ask you a personal question there?
Sure.
I have a different theory, which I may put forward very quickly. Why you are so relaxed, in spite of all of this.
Don't talk about age. That's dangerous.
No, that's another interesting theory that I didn't have in mind. No. And this is, you seem very grounded in your hometown or your home village, where your wife is a local politician and you are still a member of the firefighters, if I remember correctly.
Maybe out of practice, but on the other hand, to fight those fires, but I'm firefighting every day.
Maybe
360 days a year. So
maybe we should tell people in this town not to call upon you when their roof is on fire. But is there something to this, that you are able to combine these two worlds of global finance and local firefighting?
You mean to? I think I know what you mean. The answer is I really don't know. I really don't know. I've seen people. You know, I'm coming from very simple. Very simple environment. So absolutely. But then the downside is it takes you a long time to understand what the world is all about. When we were traveling, like to the next city, it was like today I'm going to the moon, sort of. So it was like, oh my God, and you would think this is the big world, but then a bigger world. So it takes you a long time to get to know global things. It takes a long time to get to appreciate cultures, to be somewhat smooth and savvy on the parquets of media and what have you. So that's a downside. So if you have a very, very good education and you've been born into the global environment, it's much easier to start up. So actually you have a downside. The only one thing I believe which helps you sometimes is if you never forget where you come from. Because on your time up, you meet a lot of people. On your way up, you meet a lot of people. And most everyone stays behind because otherwise you would not be the one to go up. And I'll tell you something. On your way down, you're going to meet them all again. And you better be sure that they remember you in a meaningful way or in a fair way, not in a, well, now it's payback time, right? So maybe that is, I really don't know, but I always say nobody's perfect, but a team can be. That's why sometimes I get a bit, what should I say that, I don't say agitated, but I think, come on, this King Joe, it's stupid. It's absolutely, honestly, really stupid, because the last thing I want to be is that. Thanks God now we have a new French kid on the block who's residing his business stuff in Versailles, so hopefully I can carry that one away and to a better person and one who deserves that more. But I think what, at the end of the day, the target is that people 10, 15, 20 years from now, when we do also golfing and don't talk about it in public, that people look back and say, that guy, after all, he was trying to do his best for his people. That's, I think, the thing one should strive for, and then you always be grounded.
We have 1 more minute for one last question. You were quoted once with saying something about the former CEO of GE. And that was, Immelt never said he was sorry. My question is, of course, is there something you're sorry about, and what is the stuff that you are gladdest about and proudest about?
Well, there's a lot of stuff, sometimes you should say sorry, because we make a lot of mistakes every day. I still can keep my mouth shut if somebody else is being asked about something, jump in. Why don't leave your people and have your people shine, and step back if the sun shines, but then go front runner if the wind comes from the front. So I think it's just trying to be mindful. I still make so many mistakes that sometimes in the evening I think, idiot, how the hell could you do that? What I'm proud about? Well, I'm proud about my family. I'm proud about that there is so many people who come and ask me and say, can you help me? And I said, you know what? I actually may want to do this. And it's great. I was in Görlitz and I said, well, look, folks, I don't know yet how we do it. I'm not going to let you alone. You don't walk alone. Whatever it's going to happen, you're not walking alone. And you could tell there were people there, and they're simple people. They just want to do their job right. They want to have, go home to their families, want to have a meaningful life. And you could tell they were like, really? So you could tell they're like, come on, is that really? Is that? I said, no, I'm not going to let you down. We need to find a way how to do this, and there will be a way. There will be a way. Because when I look into the eyes of those people, you could tell they deserve a future. They deserve a future. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And we'll see how it goes, but this company is so powerful, it's so strong, that we can take a few people along if need be. But we have to have a view on coming back to be strong, because if we lose the strength, then no one will listen anymore. And you're on defense, and you can say what you want, you'll never get back up anymore.
Somehow I have the impression, instead of ending the conversations that started, but thank you so much for these authentic answers. And I wish, and I don't always say that, we could talk a lot longer. But I think we did get an impression not only of what agitates you right now, the beginning of our conversation, but also of the person behind the CEO. And that I'm very happy about, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.